From KPRC2, this is Houston Newsmakers with Khambrel Marshall.
Good morning and welcome to Houston Newsmakers with my special guest, Congresswoman Lizzie Fletcher, Democrat, representing the 7th Congressional District. Good to see you.
It's great to see you, Khambrel, as always.
We have a lot to talk about. Let's start with the climate in Congress these days. 118th Congress, drastically different from last year when Democrats were in control. Other than a new speaker, of course, now the fact Republicans are now chairs of the various committees. Talk about the change in that leadership. Is that frustrating for you now, being in the minority as opposed to majority?
Well, it's definitely different. And one of the things a lot of people may not realize about Congress is whoever's in the majority really sets the agenda. They control what comes to the floor. I remain hopeful that we'll have some opportunities to work on bipartisan legislation. But also a big part of my focus, for a couple of reasons, is making sure that the historic legislation that we passed in the last Congress gets implemented across the country. And so I'm very proud that this Congress, I've been appointed to serve on a new regional leadership council. It's 12 members of the House Democratic Caucus elected by our Democratic leader, Hakeem Jeffries, to work with the Biden administration in the 12 regions, the way that we organize our caucus. So I represent on this council Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona. Yeah. And our goal is to make sure that the work that we did in these historic bills, right, the bipartisan infrastructure bill, the CHIPS and Science Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, that really unleashes a ton of federal dollars, first of all, but also programs to help invest in America. And so part of what we're doing is making sure that those investments reach every corner of America. And so I'm really excited about working with the administration to make sure that we see the fruits of that work, of those legislative efforts that truly are historic.
And so that can be a challenge, can it not? Because it depends on the constituents and people who are potential voters. A lot of times they're not really aware of who's responsible for the good stuff they get or the bad stuff they get or nothing they get. So is that one of the roles that you'll play, trying to make sure that what has happened, what has been passed is visible so people know, okay, this is the benefit that I'm receiving from this legislation? Well,
that's certainly part of it, because I think, as you know, people have a lot of criticisms of Congress. I think the last Congress that I served in did some incredible work, and I do want people to know, I think that we're living in a very difficult moment in our democracy, and people have lost some faith in some of our institutions of government, and I think it's important to show people that it matters to participate in our democracy, that it matters to participate in our society, and that we can do good things when we work together, and that's what you see in these bills and in this legislation. So, and there are examples all over the place. I was just having a conversation yesterday with someone about how the money that we sent to state and local governments, to the city of Houston with the American Rescue Plan, the city of Houston's using those funds for the One Safe Houston program. Harris County's using funds that we authorized in that same legislation to make sure that we're addressing and creating new health initiatives to keep our community safer. So there's a great partnership. And I think here in Houston and Harris County and Fort Bend County, we're lucky to have great partners that are working together now to bring those programs home. But it is important that people know that we're working together and that we're getting things done. And what we see from some of these bills, incredible federal investment. There's already more than $14 billion in investments in over 350 projects already coming to Texas as a result of this legislation since 2021. It's also unleashed about $75 billion in private investment, especially through the CHIPS and Science Act, where we see Texas Instruments building a new semiconductor plant here in Texas, Samsung building a new semiconductor plant in Texas. It's important, and it was really important for us to do this to help address some of the things that were so clear to us during the pandemic on supply chain challenges and making sure that we have our own security in building and making things here at home so that we always have them. So these are huge efforts. Really, I've only been in Congress, this is my 3rd term, but I serve with people who've been there for decades who say the last Congress was the most productive Congress in their lifetimes and possibly in American history. So we've got to make sure that we're telling people what we're doing and that we're continuing to get things done.
Well, I know the 118th Congress is a little bit different now. There's a lot of effort on behalf of Republicans to kind of undo some of the things that were done in the previous Congress. But I know you've had a long concern about voting rights. You voted for the People Act in the last Congress. It got no support from Republicans. It's not made it through the Senate at this point. What are your concerns about the voting process in the country if things don't change?
Well, there's a long list, but one of the things that I mentioned is that a lot of people feel and are disenfranchised. And so we have not just the opportunity, but the responsibility to ensure the safety and the future of our democracy. And that means making it possible for people to vote in our elections, making people feel like their vote matters, because it does. And we see that here at home. I think in Harris County, we have, I think it's the longest ballot in the country. We vote on so many important things. We see the effects of the importance of voting in all the different elections that we have, in school board elections and city council elections, which we have coming up this year, in congressional and presidential elections next year. It's so important for people to make their voices heard. And what we see are that states, and unfortunately our state is one of them, are putting up roadblocks, making it harder rather than easier for people to vote, to cast their ballots safely, and to cast their ballots in a place that's convenient. I think in Harris County, where I live, we have seen huge efforts to make it easier for people to vote, to make sure, and we saw during the pandemic, the drive-through voting, 24-hour voting for people who it's hard to get to the polls from 7 to 7. We have great efforts on early voting. I think that's terrific, and we see about half the vote coming in early voting.
Republicans say that we've gone too far, though.
That's right, and so there's pushback there. There was a bill filed in Austin. Obviously, I serve in the Congress in Washington, but I know that there are bills in the legislature in Austin right now trying to prohibit polling places on college campuses, trying to do things that just make it harder to vote. There's no reason not to have polling places on college campuses for students and faculty that want to vote there between classes. And what we saw is that expanding our voting locations in Harris County, I heard from more people about how great it was to have a polling place in the Texas Medical Center, how convenient it was for the many thousands of people who work there. And so that's what we need to do. The other thing we need to do, so H.R. 1 covers a lot of that, addresses gerrymandering, which is a huge issue, political gerrymandering, addresses some of the campaign finance issues and dark money in politics. A lot of people feel like there's a lot of information coming at them and they don't know where it's coming from. And it's because people can put out information without having to disclose who they are, who's behind it. That's not true for candidates. We disclose everything, but there are vehicles to put out information without saying where it's coming from. So addressing some of those kinds of things so that people can know where the information that they're relying on is coming from. The other thing, a corollary bill that wasn't in H.R. 1, but in H.R. 4, the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, restores the protections of the Voting Rights Act that the Supreme Court gutted in 2013 in the case of Shelby County versus Holder. What we've seen, especially here in Texas, is that we still need those protections, and we still need to ensure that people across the United States, no matter where they live, that our citizens have the right and the ability to cast their votes.
So you clearly have a lot on your plate, that's for sure. We're going to have more with Congresswoman Fletcher after the break.